Yes, we have the lowest
We are
rate of
live.
corporate housing benefit.
That's interesting. Okay, Sebastian, welcome back. Yes, we're
Okay.
looking at 766, a bill we do not and will not have possession of. But
Will not.
will not, I have been told, no, we passed over it today. Because we've just gotten a letter from DFR expressing some of their concerns. One of which is about the legality of what section of the bill. So we thought we'd hear from them. I think the goal would be if we had concerns that we would move forward with. So, which is really our only option at this point, or do nothing.
Okay, so Sebastian Arguendo for the Department of Financial Regulation. I understand that at this point, all of you should have received the memorandum we submitted dated April 19th, discussing a couple of the points that were raised in this bill and raised in Senate Health and Welfare. So the first of those that I wanted to discuss is the proposal to exempt inhalers for members under the age of 18 from KIROP. This wouldn't strictly speaking be illegal. However, if the purpose of that proposal is to save money by limiting the benefit to persons under the age of 18, we would not be able to do that because federal anti-discrimination laws would require the department and all of the payers to make that benefit available to everyone, regardless of age. So that is the concern that we're raising with respect to the inhalers.
So the impact would be much larger.
Yes.
So the one fix would be allowing inhalers without prior authorization for anyone regardless of age.
Yes. But we don't know what the price impact of that would be.
And we'll ask insurance companies to address if they have any. I probably don't, I'm sure. Yeah, that's like.
I don't know if we're ready to segue for the second part of your memo, but I have a question on that.
Yeah, we're getting there. So the second part of the memo has to do with the other forms of utilization review that are raised in the bill. So because this isn't your bill, I've brought my handy dandy whiteboard to go through the four big chunks of it and how much what they are, how much the insurers think that each piece will cost, and what the department's position is.
And the reason for this is that for at least 20 years, this legislature has been actively working to get all Vermonters insured. And one of the prime reasons they aren't insured is the cost of healthcare. Can we get someone to hold that for you?
I'll try and pull it up.
No, I think.
I guess this committee room is not as cozy as some of the others where this will work. Thank you, Emily. So let's start with claims edits. Just in layman's terms, a claims edit is an automated review of a submitted claim that happens prior to payment. There's been a lot of concerns raised by the provider community about how certain claims edits that were brought online in 2023 were implemented by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont. And Section 2 of the bill is meant to address a lot of those concerns by limiting the permissible edits to what Medicare does. Blue Cross has estimated that this will cost approximately $30 million. We won't be able to verify whether or not that's true without an actuarial study. So the department would support striking that language in favor of an actuarial study that's commissioned by the legislature and funded that would seek to get at whether the cost of limiting claims edits to what Medicare does is as much as the payers say it is, and whether the flip side of that, which is the reduction of administrative burden to providers, would be worth it, so to speak. Okay,
Nasty question. The budget is done. How can you do that without additional funding?
we have a contract with an actuary, we could potentially do it without additional funding. But it's something that we would come back here next year to
Next
say.
year is fine.
Okay. So the second part of this is prior auth. And I think all of you kind of have an understanding of what prior auth is in terms of a requirement that care gets approved by your insurer before the care is covered. And in a nutshell, what H766 will do is require insurers to more or less match their PA requirements to what Vermont Medicaid does. Medicaid and commercial insurance are very different kinds of payers. And the commercial payers have raised, both Blue Cross and MVP have raised significant concerns about the cost impact, because in many cases, the amount that Medicaid pays is substantially less than what commercial insurers pay for the same service.
Yes, we did hear some very significant.
Yes.
payment.
So given the potential cost impacts, we would recommend an actuarial study of the prior auth limitations for the same reasons.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just to better understand, I mean, when UVM Medical, so this is a big concern for them. And they ask for increase in their rates and we pay the sort of bills that
Yeah.
don't get paid otherwise. Is there a sort of cyclical nature to this $30 million that where it ultimately comes from? It's all healthcare money
Yeah.
that we cover at some point.
Yeah.
And so denying UVM Medical these dollars means UVM Medical is probably looking to get it elsewhere. What otherwise what happens?
So ultimately, like all of the money in the healthcare system comes from us. It comes from us in premiums for private payers or taxes for public payers. And I think the question that it behooves us to answer before limiting private payers' ability to do utilization review is whether the cost to ratepayers is made up for by reductions in administrative expenses on the provider side. And I think here it's important to remember that the portion of the insurance market that the department has regulatory jurisdiction over is actually quite small. We're talking probably less than 100,000 Vermonters in plans that the department regulates. And all the other folks in employer-sponsored plans that are regulated by ERISA or plans that are managed by the federal government, such as TRICARE, federal employees, all of those prior auth requirements would still be there for providers. So I think that's part of the reason why the department would support having like a much better handle on the cost benefit analysis of limiting utilization review in this way before proceeding.
To save money or to maintain things, the provider would have to lay off people, correctly? They're saying, we have all these people and they spend X hours a day and they could do it better providing healthcare.
Yeah,
But providing healthcare just as more hours they bill, it's not, they'd have to cut down on their administrative staff and see if commensurate cut down in what they charge. And
yeah,
Or raise.
yeah, so I can't speak to how providers would hypothetically react if, you know, if we were to wave a magic wand and do away with all prior authorization. I imagine that would make a lot of people in this room very happy. But right, sitting here right now, I cannot tell you that would lower costs or result in layoffs of administrative staff.
right, I can't see enough of that to make a significant change. Cindy Brock.
This is one of the questions on prior authorization is I know I've been talking with carriers and I'm talking with providers of services over the last several days. And one question is whether or not there's a compromise position in all of this that may make sense. And I'd just like to know if there's any thought that you have, and that is to keep on the period. The problem with prior authorization, much of it seems to be time.
Yeah.
In other words, the idea that prior authorizations are not just taking a phone call and up to half an hour or 20 minutes or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Or to have clarity about what needs prior authorization and what doesn't before lumping it and addressing those things in the short run. Well, perhaps we do some studies, might be an approach to take. For example, if we said that prior authorizations done by telephone have to be done within 1 hour of the initial call. Second, if we said that first level appeals have to be done within 24 hours or the first, 24 hours for the first call, and any appeal have to be done within a second 24-hour period. In the event that it's not done, it would be deemed to be approved.
Right.
After the contact is.
So a couple of things. Part of that is already in the bill, so we're gonna jump
The
to.
24 hours for urgent is in
Yes.
the bill, but the 24 hours for everything is not.
Yes, and that is certainly an amendment that one or more of you could sponsor. Again, this is not something that the department has studied or discussed with stakeholders.
Okay, but your suggestion is we get an actuarial study so that we know what we're doing to rates before we do it. And it may be negligible, as many of the providers' representatives have stated, or it may be significant. And I've fought too long, I think of the folks on the bronze plans with the high deductibles. The small employers that will just deem they can't
Yeah.
afford to do this.
And
And they will show up as
yes,
repaying the emergency.
yeah, and I think one more thing for the committee to consider is as commercial insurance gets more expensive, what will happen is that going through airways private, since we've already talked about these patents.
Does this live anywhere else but this whiteboard?
Um,
I mean, like, this is real backward now in here.
I use the whiteboard as
Yeah.
sort of an illustrative aid for
Right.
testimony, so I can do things like
No,
this,
no, but
but
$30.4 million, I'm
Oh.
still not quite sure
This
where
was-
that estimate comes from, what it includes.
yes, you can find that in Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont's written testimony that they submitted on this bill.
And it's
So it's,
on our website.
so it's not new for today.
That's right,
They said before it proclaims that it's specifically.
right.
This would be the.
Yeah, I mean, if,
New cost.
So
yes, yeah, it would be new costs that's, they don't save by requiring an ultrasound rather than a CAT scan. Sometimes you may have.
But. Okay, claims edits are after the fact. Right, I mean,
No, claims edits are the first thing that happens. They look, if I remember correctly,
no, they look at the bill and
they
they
look at the
say,
bill and see if it,
but then the procedure's already been done.
no. Yes, the procedure has been done, okay.
Yeah.
So,
But I think the concern was they were going to Medicare. Which, if I'm remembering the testimony, doesn't cover everything for it.
And it pays very differently.
Yeah,
they have different claims edits, but they do have claims edits.
Yes,
yes,
But the question also that was raised was the amount of money that it would cost to switch that system so that the two could be compared. And I heard estimates in the millions of dollars just for the data processing changes that would need to be made for that to be able to be done at the level that was anticipated.
Right, I just wanna be clear that we're talking about, this is a bill that's already been issued to the insurance companies. And there's $30.4 million just of Blue Cross Blue Shield saying, we're editing this bill. And there's no like.
to make sure
conversation.
that it's covered. I think what we're looking at is, we're gonna roll the dice. One group is saying we're gonna bet that it's not gonna increase rates significantly. The other group that does the rates are saying, yes, it is. The critique I've heard, one of the reasons we weren't getting the bill, was that there hadn't been an actuarial study by the insurance companies. Nobody has had, and joint fiscal really isn't set up to do the what happens if kind of thing.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, well, let me finish.
Okay.
DFR is now volunteering to do the actuarial study, which has been a missing part of this, and nothing, well, depends on what we do. Just if anything would change while that goes on.
Okay, can I ask, okay, so can it occur that the insurance company denies to pay part of a claim and that cost goes straight to the insured? Or does it always happen that the institution billing eats the cost?
I think
So
that we would have to
I can,
get testimony from the insurance companies with that.
yeah, I can address part of that. So it depends on whether we're talking about claims edits or prior authorization.
Okay.
But
right now we're just talking about claim.
yes, so remember that a claims edit is a pre-payment review of a submitted claim to make sure that it adheres to coding rules. So if a insurer performs a claims edit and the claim doesn't pay, the liability or payment is with the provider. Providers have contracts with insurers, and every one of those contracts that I've seen prohibits those providers from billing members for covered services. So in a claims edit situation, it's not like the insurer saying that service isn't covered. what they are saying is that, hey, you made a mistake in coding this claim. So,
So we'd have to believe that our providers are making over $30 million of mistakes. When that's not what we heard from UVM Medical, who has like 200 staff working on this or something.
Well, that was their managed care organization was here, which is somewhat different than a regular doctor's office.
That was billing, I mean, that was the head of billing.
Okay, we did hear it.
so the CPT is frighteningly complex, and I suspect that even the best billing departments will make mistakes. Is it $30.4 million worth? The department doesn't know, and that's why we want to thoroughly study this in a reasonably scientific way.
So we have estimates from one of the insurance companies, main one, that does, these are exchange and private insurance. That this is what it costs. We don't know that. Other people say, oh, we don't think it'll cost anything, it'll be negligible. We don't know that either. And one of the complaints has been, nobody's done an actuarial study. So what the department is saying is that they will do that actuarial study. And we can keep the bill in place, move the implementation date until the actuarial study comes in. We don't have to just kill it. You know, we can keep the momentum there, but give ourselves time to find out exactly what the impact will be. If we do this, if it's 90% of them are approved and it won't cost that much, then we'll know it. Or if it's going to raise rates, you know, we're looking, I think, at almost $45 million at this point, somewhere in there. It's getting to be serious money. We can know that too. Senator Brock and then Senator Romans.
It seems there are two things involved here. One, the actuarial study desirably will give us the information we need in order to make an intelligent final decision. But the issue also is the effect right now on providers, in that there is an amazing amount of time, which I don't think anybody is contesting, with few exceptions, is being expended, particularly in the prior authorization area. And there is the cost associated with that is being borne throughout the system. So time is an issue, and it seems to me that we should try to do something about the time right now. By accelerating the requirement to respond to prior authorizations in a timely fashion and allowing the payment to proceed in the event that the carriers do not respond, which would be the way to deal with it, is one way to deal with that. The second would be to do the actuarial study at a time certain, and then a future legislature should decide what to do with that study. I don't think it's a wise idea for us to pass a bill right now that we don't know exactly what it's going to do because it needs an actuarial study, and do an actuarial study with the bill on the books. I think that the response to the study belongs to a future legislature that can deal with what's in the results of the actuarial study. I wouldn't want to try to prejudge it by passing something that we don't know anything about.
I guess my thoughts are purely political. Since I've been trying to get possession of this bill, which is an insurance bill, and I've been told, well, it passed unanimously in the House. It's really hard to stop it. I had the occasion when I was on health and welfare with high-priced medications, and by loosening them up to every pharmacy, we lost the PBM benefit of limiting that pharmacy. It was more convenient, but it cost a lot more, and I couldn't get any traction on the floor. We are starting this, we don't have possession of the bill. We're starting this at a disadvantage, and I think rather than just kill all the unanimous support, if we just let the bill ride, move with sunset or move the implementation date until after the study, and we could do, it won't until will be the next, be the next legislature, it'll be next year, until the next legislature approves it or removes the sunset.
I think there are so many things in the bill, for example, the link to Medicare, for example, that just from all the testimony I've heard, may be very, very seriously flawed. And I'd be very hesitant to vote in favor of adding that as a minimum at this stage. And again, if we disagree with the House, we disagree with the other body from time to time. And
Well,
course,
we've got to
generally
get it
speaking,
voted
we're
through the
right.
Senate. And it's got a fair amount of momentum in the Senate. I think we felt that last Friday. It's a very
but not
emotional.
necessarily for the right
appeal.
reasons.
And we're bucking that. We're the nasty money committee that says, oh, we're not sure we can afford it. So I had sent around Hinsdale first and then
When I look at the claim edit piece, to me, it looks like healthcare cost that's been incurred. And the question is, how is it paid for? And I would instead propose, and we don't have possession of the bill, so I don't know if we're doing an amendment or what we're doing, but I would instead propose that we move forward with this provision in the bill, and the insurance companies can petition on specific edits that they would like to see put back in. I would imagine that double billing is a separate thing than a claims edit that is tied to Medicare. Is that incorrect?
Um.
Does Medicare allow for double billing where other insurance companies do not?
I don't know what you mean by double billing.
Well, we're hearing about claims edits that mean a number of different things. As you said, it's very complex. So unless it's a double billing, it's healthcare
Oh,
cost that's
okay.
been incurred. It's not a,
I-
it's not a line item that didn't incur an actual cost, correct?
Okay, so this has to do with the specific claims edits that came up with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont last year. And those claims edits were imposed on codes that represented that a separate and unique service was performed during a visit. So let's say that you went to see your doctor because you had a head laceration. And during that encounter, your doctor performed a neurological exam. Your doctor could bill for both the laceration and the exam with a what's called a modifier, and that modifier was one of the claims edits that was imposed by Blue Cross. The
Meaning it reduced the cost because it was the same visit?
right, so what Blue Cross is essentially saying, this is where people are talking about double billing, is that the use of that modifier is incorrect in a lot of situations where, let's say, a patient is coming in for an already scheduled treatment, and prior to that treatment, the provider does an evaluation and discusses the treatment with the patient.
Mhm.
All of that is part of the treatment that's being billed. So if you're billing for the evaluation and for the treatment in that context, that is more like improper double billing.
According to Medicare also?
According to the CPT, which are the codes that are used to bill insurance.
That's
So
separate than Medicare.
so what we're talking about in this bill is using the same claims edits that Medicare does. So Medicare still uses the CPT, but they don't check for that particular modifier before payment. And this what will happen is what has happened in the past is that the CPT has always had those requirements for those modifiers. But historically, payers have audited claims to discover improper use of those modifiers. And it's not like providers love audits either. And I think one salient point that's been raised in earlier testimony by Blue Cross is that the use of audits to discover billing issues is potentially unfair because they only audit one provider group at a time, whereas a claims edit is applied universally against all or most providers.
But then there's no appeal to that claim edit.
So an appeal in this context is a term of art to mean a claim that can be externally appealed, but I believe that Blue Cross has testified that providers can ask for reconsideration of claims that have been denied in these claims edits.
Medicare is not a private insurance company. If it runs out of money, we expect that the federal government will keep it solvent. Blue Cross doesn't have that expectation. I thought Medicare said we will pay X amount for a service similar to Medicaid. I think Medicare is a little better than Medicaid, but they set the rate, right, that they will pay.
That Medicare sets the rate that it will pay.
Isn't there isn't there?
Yes, there's a rate that Medicare pays. There are a lot of factors that go into that rate, but if you think of a rate structure along the lines of Medicaid generally reimburses the least, Medicare reimburses a little bit more, and private payers reimburse a lot more. That's close to a picture of the different pots of money that go into the healthcare system.
So. Yeah, Medicare it's a government benefit program.
Yes,
It's not. If it goes insolvent, it goes insolvent. Insurance companies are not the same. They are private businesses. If they go insolvent, we probably drain the, there is a trust fund for companies. Right, I forget the name, but there is an insurance backstop, so if a company goes under, the customers are protected.
Right.
Does that cover health insurance?
right. So there are a couple of different levels at which the department would take more aggressive steps to intervene to protect the solvency of our insurers. But the bottom line is that under the Affordable Care Act, insurers are required to spend at least 80 cents of every premium dollar on care. And for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont, MVP, and Cigna, in the Vermont market, that number is closer to 90 cents. So if premiums go up, that reflects increases in the cost of care. And if the cost of care goes up, then the department in its filing with the Green Mountain Care Board for health insurance rate review would recommend to the board that higher premiums be approved in order to maintain the solvency level of our insurers.
I found this on the web.
I have no idea.
Well, it's something that's very important for you to look at. Sergeant Chisholm.
So I am concerned with this bill because as I looked at all this testimony, I only see this increasing our health spending, and we already have increasing health costs at an alarming rate. And so, for those reasons, then with this testimony, which is the DFR saying we want to do an actuarial study before we make these changes, I could be persuaded, and I don't think you're going to have the answer to this, but I'm going to pose it anyway. Have other states done this, or are we getting out in front of everybody trying this?
Yeah, so go back to the whiteboard really quick. There this, since we've already gone past this point. The one part of this bill that we haven't discussed yet is step therapy. And this is the only part of this bill besides the 24-hour time frame for urgent prior auths that other states have done. And we've discussed protections for step therapy extensively with our stakeholders, and because MVP and Cigna do business in other states, they largely would not have any operational or financial changes as a result of the step therapy language that's in the bill. And Blue Cross estimates a $6.2 million cost impact based on our conversations with regulators in other states. The department doesn't believe it will be as much as Blue Cross says it will be. But this part of the bill is law in 21 other states, including New York and Massachusetts. And that's why the department would support continuing to keep the step therapy protections
As
in the
it
bill.
is, or are the protections that, as the changes in the bill?
The
The language in the bill.
Yes, we support the language in the bill with respect to step therapy.
Okay,
And the timeframes? And the timeframes?
Yes,
okay.
the timeframes as stated in the bill, like I responded to Senator Brock, we don't know about how much it would cost to move to 1 hour prior auths
No,
or
I meant 24 hours.
24-hour prior auths for prior auths submitted over the telephone.
Okay, so your recommendation is that for this edits and for the prior auth, that they be delayed until there is an actuarial study.
Yes,
Okay,
Which you estimate to be a year, is that right?
I think a year would be sufficient time to conduct the kind of study we need to.
so we could deal with that with the effective date.
I agree that the actual study certainly makes sense to have data that you understand is in fact correct and you're making decisions on the basis of it. But at the same time, I think there's some things that we do need to do to speed up the process we have right now. Because that's the process that's affecting the providers, and we certainly have been inundated with correspondence and communication providers. It's hurting them right now, and few of them will be gone a year from now. And what can we do to accelerate the particularly the prior authorization process is one thing that's cited more than anything else as impeding their ability to break up, to have additional time to be able to deal with patients rather than deal with insurance companies.
Sebastian, do you know what percent of our population is uninsured?
I think according to the Department of Health, it's approximately, it's 7%.
That was the number.
Oh,
It's 3%.
3%, I'm sorry.
It's down to 3. Okay, because when we started, it was 10, we got it to 7. I don't want to see it.
What's the agreed upon number?
Pardon?
What's the agreed upon?
3%.
3. Which
By
is
the end of the ACA and the Shellwood administration, it was down to 3%.
the, okay, I'd like to, we'll check that.
If I could say one more thing to help you politically, I think we should take possession of this bill. So I don't know what that
They,
means or doesn't.
I have asked
I'll say
both the
that.
pro tem and the lieutenant governor, and I have been told that we will not be given possession of this bill.
Okay.
It's
That's-
on the calendar, we passed it over, but we are being allowed a look at and the potential of a floor amendment, which would be difficult. Everybody else would be getting the emails that we've gotten. And we can do when we see that uninsured rate pop back up to 7%, and said, well, we told you something. But we don't know because we don't have an actuarial study. So if, I got Senator McCormick.
I didn't mean to,
No,
that was rude.
no,
I thought you were
no,
done.
fine.
Oh, I was just putting hand up too. Yeah,
Okay.
when you're done.
No,
Some pretty scary dollar figures.
Yes.
Okay, how would that money be spent? Where's it gonna go? If we pass the bill and then, where does that expense come from? Where does that money go to?
Right, the money would go to providers,
Pay for medical service.
pay for medical services.
for profit, our
I mean-
medical providers are by and large for profit businesses.
They're not.
How many of them are not?
All the hospitals.
All the hospital ones, okay. But they also get paid a premium for being connected to a teaching hospital. We've had long discussions in this committee, in the past over the difficulty of independent, especially primary care providers. We had one office, orthopedics, that joined the hospital, its bills went up $200 the next day, same doctors, same equipment.
But on this, they seem united, that they all have this issue and
I,
drives
yes,
up their own cost of doing this.
right. It does bring up the cost. The question is the solution we have will bring down the cost. The only way that will happen is if they lay off staff, because that will cut down their overhead. If they just use the staff differently, it won't cut down the cost. And that's the cost that's being billed.
I'd like to rejoin the conversation.
Yes,
So the money you're talking about. It's scary to me, like, if the bill passes, it'll cost this much. That's scary to me. On the other hand, if the bill passes, this much will be spent on healthcare.
Yes,
Are you suggesting that it's an expense that's actually not necessary, that people getting it don't really need the healthcare?
I'm not suggesting that. What I'm saying is that, one of the functions that all payers have, whether it's a commercial insurance plan, Medicare, Medicaid, you name it, is to, verify the integrity of, payments. Among other things, you know, it's not just like making sure that claims are properly coded. It's being able to review claims for fraud, waste, and abuse, which is, I understand it's a loaded term, but, this is part of what we expect insurers and all payers to do to keep premiums and taxes as low as possible while still providing funding for the healthcare system.
Yeah, the emails I'm getting, the chair mentioned emails that other committees will get, we've been getting. Those emails describe a situation that I'm a layperson, but it strikes me as, but I do have to pass laws about it. Anyway, that's what we citizen legislatures do. We pass laws on things we're not experts on. But what I'm getting emails about sound pretty indefensible. I mean, it's just people having to wait hours or days or weeks the approval for some medical care. Is the fraud that rampant?
That's not an example of fraud. I think that when I think of fraud in the healthcare system, I think of, and there was recently a story about, fraudulent billing of urinary catheters in Medicare, and like, that's the kind of thing that we want insurers and all payers to, root out to the best of their ability, and,
That's a jailhouse offense. I mean, that's a real.
I mean, yes,
That's fraud.
it's fraud.
I'm talking here about just doctors arguing with insurance companies about medicine. I mean, the emails I'm getting, a theme I get is, look, I'm the doctor.
Yeah.
Since when do insurance companies press start?
The first time I testified on prior thought, I noted that, I'm an attorney who works for the state, and, I would be pretty salty if, the Department of Human Resources, had to approve every bit of work I did before getting paid. I fully appreciate how frustrating the prior auth system is for, providers. That being said, it is one of the few levers that payers have to contain cost. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. I'm saying that, there's a trade-off.
And we have asked them to contain cost. We put formularies in place because you may have really good, no prior auth, you get what you want when you want it. But many people can't afford it, and so it's always a balance. I hate high deductible plans. They put families in a terrible position. But it's all some people can afford. And so the healthcare committee wants the best healthcare possible. Our job has traditionally been to try and make sure that everybody can afford some health insurance. Not everybody has a platinum plan. And it will be more convenient. Doctors won't feel like they're being second guessed if we do away with everything. The risk we're taking is that Blue Cross and Blue Shield are correct, and that on top of whatever they're going to be asking for an increase this year, we're going to be adding 5, 6, I've heard as high as 13%. We won't know until it works out. And I think that's the risk. Nobody has done an actuarial study. So we can say, yeah, it's only gonna add 1% to the bill. So it's worth it. Or if it's going to add 20 or 30%, is it worth it? What's the trade-off for the people in the bronze sector? Are they gonna end up uninsured? You know, and it's like property taxes. Some people are not gonna be able to pay it this year. And that's what we've been doing for at least 20 years. So that's the trade.
So, I mean, first, I just wanna say, like, I'm not trying to speak for anybody, but I think we're a divided committee on this matter. We don't have possession of the bill. I have some questions. I mean, it's not clear to me that you're saying that all private insurance providers pay for the same, you know, have the same CPTUs, do the same claims edits, et cetera. So what we're hearing is the deep inconsistency across the board is one of the biggest hurdles for payers is, you know, Blue Cross does this, MPP does this, et cetera. To level things out a little bit, you were talking about claims, you were talking about claims edits. You were part of the group that looked at prior authorization, that has been studied. There is a lot more data there. You are coming now and saying that DFR no longer feels comfortable on the claims edit side because you have information now that Blue Cross Blue Shield testified to, I think, last week. I'm just trying to make sure I'm
Yeah.
understanding what you're saying.
So, with respect to the prior auth, we did discuss, prior auth reform with stakeholders, over the summer, but, our discussion, came to the conclusion that there was no consensus between, payers and providers on, prior.
I think
auth.
we're seeing that
Yes,
play out now.
exactly.
You figured that one out.
But, we also noted that
But
one,
where was DFR in all of that? Were you like the mediator? Do you have?
we were running, we were meeting with all of the, parties separately. So, yeah, you could call us the mediator, facilitator, but we didn't discuss, in any great detail, essentially the pegging of the commercial prior auth system to what Medicaid does. And we didn't discuss claims edits, in that group at all. To the extent that the department did discuss claims edits with the payers and providers, it was to address all of the issues that had been raised with, the modifiers that, we discussed earlier. And, after meeting with the payers and providers and both at once, and my testimony in other committees was that many of those issues, were caused by, poor communication between the, payers, the providers, and the department. And, pegging, the claims edit system to what Medicare does, would solve that issue, but, our concern is that it is a much broader remedy than is required to, address what is essentially a breakdown of communication between, the payers and, the providers in terms of communicating the impact of proposed claims edits and, educating providers on what they need to do.
I'll just say this and then I'll be done, because I don't know what the path is before 4:30 when we do housing, but. I mean, it's a very expensive communication breakdown, right? And the money still has been spent. We count on the Green Mountain Care Board to look at rates, you know, where we really see what's gonna happen to families each year. And what it looks like to be underinsured, what our hospital needs, what our medical care system needs. I'm pretty satisfied that this is in fact a healthcare policy issue. People aren't able to receive the same quality of care, the same timeliness of care, and payers are spending more of their time and energy and professional well-being on trying to get paid. So I can see why this became a healthcare policy question. So I'm just pretty satisfied with the bill. I think there's some disagreement, so I just want to state my sort of overall position before we decide what some might do on an amendment.
Okay. Sandra.
I first of all want to put in a little disclaimer here. My colleagues know that over the last several years, I have gone through a series of pile of medical issues. And I am not going to villainize insurance companies. The fact is, I've been well, therefore that way.
Wow, see.
I am blown away by how much money my healthcare has cost and how much I did not have to come up with. Okay, so the insurance companies have been very good to me. My point is just, I don't think, I'm not being anti-insurance company to say I don't want them practicing medicine. And it may be, I think that the same statement can be seen as oversimplifying, or it can be seen as cutting to the real issue. And I think the real issue here is that insurance companies right now are practicing medicine. And they're not qualified to do it. And I think the doctors, the providers should be getting more difference than they're getting out of the patient's interest. And if I'm oversimplifying, I may be.
Very fair point. I would just say you used this term that I was hesitant to use because I don't understand our healthcare system as well as I need to. But I see them as playing a cost containment role, as I think I heard you say, for better or for worse. Should the insurance companies be trying to contain costs? I don't know, but I think our system is so dysfunctional and that we need to go to a single payer system that I see them as the only entity that is pushing back on what we're spending on healthcare. And that's why I'm worried that we're taking all this out when no other state has done so. And I'm worried that spending is going to go even worse and amplifying the problem. That's what I am.
And in fairness, we have asked them to contain costs. Maybe not in the last year, but since I've been in this building, containing costs of health insurance. We went as far as we could with single payer. We don't have a single payer system. This is our one way to contain costs so that the working middle class folks can afford insurance. And it was a leading driver in the cost, the property tax increase that we're looking at this year. It's an expense, and that we're all gonna weight that scale, I think, a little differently between wanting to have the best possible health care and wanting to be able to afford any health care. So I'm gonna leave this here. Senator Gray, have you got any thoughts on this? I don't know if you were here, but DFR has suggested that they will do an actuarial study for both the claims edits, the bill requirement that it go to Medicare, because there's an estimate of over $30 million on that one, and on prior auth, to see, which is, I think, a $12.5 million estimate, to see if those in fact are likely to happen. So that we know what we're doing.
Yeah, it's hard. Not in a position. Healthcare seems to me like if someone walked in to natural resources and started talking about Act 250.
Who would do that?
I would, yeah. It would remind me a little of
Inside joke.
where I feel like I am on this issue, but the prior auth thing, that to me was one of the most compelling things, but I felt like that there, it seemed as though it, wasn't in the patient's best interest to have to go through, like a step process. When prior authorizations had to be renewed because the formulary changed on the first of the year and things like that.
DFR has recommended we not change the step process, and we keep it as it is in the bill. This is, they're looking at prior auth and the edits. Okay, we'll have an item, same thought.
But where I come down again is, I think, it's been said that this is the one area that does cost containment, in the provision of medical services, and I think that is an important role, and I think you have to recognize that even the people in the insurance companies, as evil as they may be, they're using medical professionals to do this, not truck mechanics.
Right.
And so I don't think we should automatically discard it because an insurance company looks at it as duplicate billing or looks at it as excessive billing or looks at other alternatives. The key right now is to, rather than speculate as to what the result is, to look at facts, and an actuarial study, which I strongly would support, will help us do that. In the meantime, though, what do we do? And my belief is we should not do nothing between now and the year in which we get the results of the actuarial study and future legislature can act on it. But in the meantime, during the course of that year, I believe there are specific things we can do to expedite the prior authorization process. And there are ways that we could do it. We could specify it here, or we could create a process that brings insurers and medical providers together, perhaps under the auspices of DFR, to get in a room and come up with a method for expediting the prior authorization process. So as all prior authorizations can get done within 24 hours, as an example. And to come back with that as a, call it a report or whatever, but not just a report, but actual implementation of things to do that. And I think my sense is from the discussions that I've had, both with providers and with insurance companies over the past several days, I think that's a real possibility.
I think DFR just said they didn't have much luck getting them to talk.
Well, they did have a bit of a hammer when they were talking.
Yeah, that,
We can put some outlines in terms of what it is we want to achieve. For example, that a physician shouldn't be spending 2 hours on the telephone waiting for somebody to pick up the phone at an insurance company, at least an insurance company that's here in Vermont, or an insurance company that we volunteer purposes regularly.
so callback,
Callback standards,
that's what I'm wanting.
result standards in terms of getting an answer within X period of time. And if you don't get an answer within that period of time, it's deemed approved.
Then, I think if we're going to achieve something,
The pitch clock.
yeah, we'll have to mandate.
Yeah, just
What
those two
that
things.
is.
I would say that any legislation we've had, if we look at passing legislation that a future legislator would have to implement, I would not include the Medicaid piece of that because there are too many uncertainties. We will know more when we get the actuarial results, but this is something we should study. We haven't really.
Right.
And nobody else in the United States has done this. I think that's very dangerous to do, even writing it down as to something that a future legislature does without any study. And there has been, as near as I can tell, no real study of that.
There has never been an actuarial study of any of them.
So I would take that as a minimum. I would take that out.
Take out,
Take out the notion of matching it with Medicaid and using that as a guide. And
I'm trying not to rewrite your bill. I think,
it's easy to rewrite. All you do is just eliminate that language.
but I'm just, as I said, this is a bill with a lot of momentum, unanimous vote in the House. I think if we do anything to it, we're going to have, we're gonna lose on the floor. would I lay odds on it? I think if we said we want to delay implementation for a year to give the actuarial study a chance to happen, then that it's there unless we act, it will be law. But it gives us a chance to get the information we, as an insurance committee, need to make a final recommendation, and it will inform the rest of the body, whoever's here next year, as to, we can decide, is it worth the cost? Is it worth $30 million, or is it worth $3 million? What is it?
I lied. I told you that was my last word. This is my last word, I promise.
Never ending.
Well, this, I've always liked the corollary of Murphy's Law. Once you screw something up, everything you do to make it better makes it worse. The underlying issue here, this is not on the bill, this is the underlying issue in my view, is that the United States is an outlier among industrialized democracies. Only we do not treat it. We are the only ones who do not treat healthcare as a right, basically. And this is an attempt, one of many I've watched. There are over 30 years of attempts. When I first got here, healthcare was the issue. Attempts to take a market system, a free enterprise system, profit system, and make it provide universal access to quality, affordable healthcare. It can't be done because there's no profit in it.
It can't be done because Americans, unlike all those other countries, my son's family in Canada as examples, paid 50% more. He's paying 53% of his income in taxes.
Yeah.
That's why we've had 2 attempts at single payer, and the bill has come in, and the cost is not acceptable to the average American. We were born of a tax revolt, and we see taxes as evil. And it's not that it's free in other countries, it's paid for.
Novel idea.
A novel idea, but it's paid for by everybody.
Yeah.
So
But we
we're stuck
also,
with what we've got.
yeah, but we also see a healthcare system that is overpriced or that doesn't provide necessary care as evil. So what we have is a kind of market system that we weigh down with, frankly, a lot of liberal bells and whistles to make a market system do what market forces tell it not to do. And so it's fundamentally I had an insurance agent who used to be in the house, Henry Holmes, who's a neighbor. And he came up to me once, he insisted on calling what I was advocating socialism. But he said, yeah, we gotta go one way or the other. We gotta go your socialist approach, or we gotta let the market move. And what we have now is the worst of all possible.
It is costing. Pharmaceuticals are one of the main drivers, and we don't control the cost of pharmaceuticals at this point. Maybe Medicare will
reasons.
do that. But our next group is coming in, and if we are going to do something, we need to find Jen Carby and draft an amendment. So,
I started drafting an amendment, which he's working on now, and we can further draft it. The only last response to the last response is we can't forget affordability. And we can't afford it, we can't forget it right now. Not a year from now, but now, because of all the things that are happening that are affecting the average body's pocketbook. We can't and shouldn't do things that are increase the cost of healthcare based on what we know right now in the next year, if we can act in some way to restrain that growth.
and I think past history says that we are going to see a significant increase in the cost of healthcare.
Regardless.
Regardless, we have every
That's
year.
correct. And it's going to just get worse if we do nothing about the timeliness dealing with prior authorization.
So
Or we're going to continue to allow the burnout of our physicians to occur over the next year while we do nothing.
Right. So. Can. What's my consensus? We're gonna do the McDonald method. Of delaying implementation until we get an actuarial study, so we know what implementation will cost. 1 year, rather than, this probably starts July. We probably have to move it out to another July because of the insurance. They're filing as we speak or have already filed their rates for this year, so it goes through the process and goes in next fall.
We could do the up or down on that piece, but then there would be an and. And
Yes,
the and where and continued to do nothing else, or and continued to do something to impede that cost from rising over the next year.
okay,
You can't do this or this when you got three choices in there.
You can do this to the first choice or that, and then when you get the second choice, those who went that way don't do anything, and those who do then go yes or no on the alternatives.
I think you've lost.
Okay.
Just delaying implementation until we get an actuarial study. Who can agree to that? I've got one. I think I heard Senator Chittenden say yes. Senator McDonald? No. Okay. I have a feeling, Sandra, that you can try.
I'm glad to see the enthusiasm.
Okay. Would we like to ask DFR to do the actuarial study?
Yes.
They will,
Find an alternative to the European system.
no, find out what we're doing, how much it is going to cost us. Would we like to know that, or would we just?
Who's us?
This,
In other countries, everybody
no,
pays for it, and
Senator-
here we have a,
Senator,
our inequality gets wider and wider, and people behave the way you described they behave. They say, I can't afford it.
yes. So we just decided we're gonna we're not gonna do anything to stop this bill from going in. That's what we've decided. The next question is, do we still wanna know what it's going to cost to do what we've already done? So we know who to blame.
I don't think we're gonna learn anything we don't already know, but
What are we not going to learn? What we don't know is what the actuarial result will be.
of the system that we have in this country that doesn't work.
No, we know that result. We're here where we are, fighting a battle between keeping costs at a rate that people can afford,
Some
or
people,
some people can afford. Or doing, making it a more convenient, effective system. My sense right now is that this committee is not gonna do anything, and we've got our next witnesses in. Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you.
And you will feel free to say, I told you so, if the rates go up an extra 20.
we all know they don't.
No, we have a chance, we will have to do something, Senator. And you just laying down and being run over?
No, I've been over for a long time. Laying here for a while.
I think, Senator, you're probably on Medicare.
Yeah.
Okay, so am I. That's not, we're protected, provided you can get.
And if only everybody had Medicare.
No. I tell you what it's costing every month to get Medicare supplement insurance, which will go up with the regular rates. People are not protected. People on Medicare without Medicare supplements are the ones going broke with medical debt. Medicare is not a panacea. An awful lot of our people are dual eligible. They're on Medicare and on Medicaid because I need to get that statistic, but I think it's around 50%.
That's our system.
Fine, lay down and get one over. We are now going to move on. We're going back to the housing bill. And the chair doesn't like the tax. Say that out.
Okay, the realtor's position.
I am hesitant about playing with taxes. Yeah. Okay. So we have, we needed to get Ted. We got you, we needed Kirby and the red light is still on.
Yep.
They still doing the yield bill?
But they're both calling the underlying right now. So it should be
Okay.
nice.
We're moving on to another issue which suffers the almost the exact same challenges of the Senate program laid out a half hour ago, 20 minutes ago.
So we're gonna lay down, do nothing again? There's two committees, they're working awful hard to do something.
Since Parker, no, this is like a Seinfeld episode.
Sure.
It is,
To our report.
well, but remember, this is the financial one that Senator Kitchell's asked for,
This is.
that allocates the housing funds to
Okay.
the strike.
I don't have a drafter for this, right?
What's up?
Do I have a drafter? I've got a series of amendments to a bill that I don't have a copy of. That is about that thick.
Sounds
This,
accurate.
this committee is trying to only look at the financial section. And I don't have my tax drafter, so it is tied up on the floor, so I'm not sure what to do with this. I know there's a tax and there are appropriations in this bill, which will ride in this bill. And not in the budget, that will raise and spend, which is what you chastised the other body for doing it. But we have been given permission by folks to do this because it's very limited. So I don't know who can walk us through this. John, can you? do that?
I can talk about my pieces of the amendment, although they will make more sense if Kirby has gone, but I'm happy to just lay the groundwork and set out the appropriations that flow from what he's setting up, if that's helpful, and just knock out that part, or.
Nope, it's Senator
Kirby.
Kirby.
And there, yes.
You've had all that downtime in the house. And can you turn the lights on? Yeah, there, thank you. You like my help. Okay. We have been handed out a series of amendments. I believe the bill is on our website. Do you know what day that bill is posted under?
The full bill, I can just post it on today right now.
Okay, that would probably be helpful. So we have a reference point.
I don't know if I have the right links in, but trying.
Yeah, it should be on your calendar.
Coming up for you?
No.
Okay, so.
Don't want that. Okay. So Kirby Keaton, Legislative Council, I'll be sharing the chair with, John Gray for part of this, because John drafted part of this amendment for you. We have a committee amendment, draft committee amendment for H 687 that includes.
It's a proposed amendment because this committee has not seen it and has not made a decision. I believe this was done with the Chair of Economic Development, Joint Fiscal Ledge Council, and Appropriations, but this committee knows nothing about it.
Exactly. It includes 2 requests from this committee from Friday, but the rest of it were requests from economic development and, okay, so let's get into it. The first instance of amendment, there's instances of amendments because if you recall, this bill is close to 200 pages. So we didn't strike all.
Want to go strike off?
We didn't want to do it strike all. So the first instance is to remove section 63, which is it's a section that had been drafted by Ellen. It was changing the municipal regional planning to a resilience program, but that idea was abandoned apparently. And hopefully that suffices, because I don't know much about what that proposal is going to be about. The second instance of amendment here is to. Sure.
Do you want to run through the whole bill and then? Go to,
I thought we had decided that we weren't gonna run through the whole bill.
I mean, sorry, the whole amendment.
I want to run through the amendments. What else would you like to do?
I just wanted to clarify what the request was there, because I don't want natural resources to think I was trying to make policy.
Mhm.
As I recall, there were 2 pieces of this section. It was changing the name and allowing them to do more resiliency work with the money, and a $1.5 million appropriation. There was never a $1.5 million appropriation coming from somewhere. So the money is actually there. There's 1.2 million additional. And I was fine to leave the policy language, but strike the $1.5 million appropriation, since it felt like it should be flexible for towns to do that and work on their land use map at the same time. So
Okay,
things are moving quickly, but
I'm lost.
So the
Yeah.
the money's long.
the money exists, it just isn't designated for that instead of, or whatever maps they need to produce, period. It's more flexible.
Okay, let's start with the amendment. The amendment strikes municipal and regional planning and resiliency grant program in its entirety and inserting in lieu thereof the following. And I'm not sure what the following is.
The following is deleted. The section is
Oh,
deleted.
Okay, I've ran into that before. Okay, so we have removed municipal and planning grant program, but the money is still there.
So there, I believe that Senator Ron Kinsella was saying, there is an appropriation in that section of the underlying bill.
Okay.
There's no revenue source for the appropriation, so the intent was to remove it for that reason.
No, I wish Ellen was here. It was that the 687 came over adding resilience to municipal and regional planning. We have no problem with that. It came with $1.5 million presumably transferred from existing municipal and regional planning dollars specifically for resilience. We felt we're asking municipal and regional folks to do a lot. They should have flexibility with the money. and there wasn't any revenue source for that 1.5 million. We are adding an additional 1.2 million with this property transfer tax proposal. And we never had a problem with it being, with resilience being added as a word in there. Or this new allowance of the funds, but past that, we left the $1.2 million flexible. That's our intent, and things moved very quickly today, so. If that's not what this language does, then we will need to work on it somewhere.
Okay. In the original bill,
Which is the original bit, 311 or 685.
I have no idea at this point. We have 687.
Welcome to our world.
If you're interested, I could pull up this section that's being taken out if you want,
No.
or.
Well, I'm just,
Mhm.
because this committee hasn't been through this. This is finance. In the bill 687, as it was presented to us, there is a $1.5 million appropriation coming from the newly proposed property transfer tax that would have gone to resiliency. That 1.5 has been, no, the resiliency has been taken out. The 1.5 going to regional planning is still there, but the regional planning has the ability to use that with flexibility. Is that what's happening?
That would be the goal of the language.
Let Kirby answer, please.
I'm gonna share with you this section 63 so you can see,
Okay.
just to clear things up. Want to make sure that.
Or how long is it next?
I have it, I actually work on that. So you can to the posting. You can try that. I think this is. Should be it. Okay, so this is section 63 being removed. I apologize for not
That's
being
okay.
more
I
prepared
think
for you there.
there's
As
just
I
been
said,
a
this
lot of
wasn't-
fingers in this pie.
There, yes.
And finance hasn't had their thumb in it yet, so I want to make sure we know what we're doing when it comes to money or taxes.
So
Okay,
So for this section 63, it was municipal and regional planning and resilience grant program. And ACCD would rename the municipal and regional planning and grant program as the municipal regional planning and resilience grant program. And in addition to other funds appropriated by ACCD, the grants under 24 BSA section 4306. 1.5 million, as the chair referenced, is appropriated from the general fund to municipal regional planning and resilience. And then it goes on for the purposes of that.
So this-
So that was removed, and I'm guessing I was asked to remove that because of the money spent.
okay. So that money
Mhm.
doesn't exist at this point.
There is still a section, just to avoid any confusion. I'm sorry if this is making any car thing.
Yeah.
There's still a section 62 municipal and regional planning and resilience fund. And so there's still some name changes there.
Oh, so we added. Okay, so resilience is still in there and there is still a fund in ACCD or,
This is just the municipal and regional planning fund would be renamed resilience fund. And as far as what can be used, there are some additions for
okay.
ways that
that's in
funds can be
62.
used, such as flood protection and climate resilience. So that's all still in the bill, even though it's
Okay.
not related to
It's
this
just not-
committee.
money at this point, all right. Okay. Still,
Okay, so moving on with the amendment. The second instance of amendment is to remove the section on downtown, the downtown tax credit cap, which was going to be increased from 3 million to 5 million, I believe.
and
So,
then,
so that's being removed, and that was this, this committee asked me to do that on Friday.
there is, this was one time, funding that went in, I think for 2 years, maybe we kept it at that level. It was COVID, ARPA funds. We're now back to the norm, because we don't have $2 million this year. So Probst has not appropriated that, it is a tax expenditure. So
So we'll stay at 3 million, we're just not increasing.
we just we are living by the rules we're setting for everybody else. Okay,
So for further changes that I was asked to make, we haven't previously, there were sections changing the statutory allocations for property transfer tax. That is not being changed now. Those sections were removed. They're being replaced with some session law that for this year makes those allocations. You know, this is how PTT revenue always gets not withstood. That's what this is. So it has any amount in excess of 32.9 million from the property transfer tax shall be transferred into the general fund. And then of the amount going to the general fund, 5.137 million is transferred to the general fund, or from the general fund into the VHCB trust fund. And 1.279 million is transferred from the general fund to the municipal additional planning fund. These are just the yearly allocations, and what's been told to me is being the amounts to be allocated this year.
okay. And that is in the budget?
It is, I believe all of this is balanced in budget. JFO is the absolute better people to answer these questions.
So Pat Titterton, Joint Fiscal Office, these amounts, so the 32 million is what has been written into the budget, as not stood already. The additional figures that you see there are just from the incremental increase from, Kirby will go through which increases we're talking about, but from the PTT changes, so this is just the incremental revenue.
This is the new revenue?
Yeah.
Okay,
And I actually left that out because it's not being changed for the amendment. So the underlying bill has a change to the property transfer tax.
well, we need to go over
You
that.
want to look at that language again?
Yes, because we haven't actually looked at that. I think we have walked through of it once, it was never discussed.
I'm just trying to navigate, so I'm head off my screen as voted out of national report. And my presumption was that the proposals we're looking at are amendments to that report. Is that right?
These are amendments to Bill 687 that was brought to us.
It is an amendment to the Senate Financial Report, yes.
When I'm looking at what we voted out, and section numbers are not lining up, so if you already made changes that have shifted sections, so I wouldn't be surprised to see different section numbers.
I mean, I'm not surprised to see different section numbers, but it wasn't intentional. Yeah, we will have to clean all of that up. Yeah.
Have you changed anything other than the proposals to us? That came directly here, so
Right, I have not, but you know, Ellen is working on this with a large amendment, that I think is gonna be more like a core amendment, individual amendment. John's worked with me on the Senate Finance Amendment, so there's been quite a lot of changes.
this is the amendment actually that
Mhm.
economic development. Or.
Most recently is the report coming from Senate.
Yes, that's the bill we've got.
Yes, yes.
But these amendments are,
And I'd be happy to hear of any section number differences because we need to fix that up.
okay,
So I'm pulling up,
To make sure, so we're on the same page, I'm sure, I think we're all thinking the same thing. So I'm expecting since 687 is voted out of committee and reported, so that the amendments proposed here lay into that bill, and we're still keeping one thing,
Right.
one report moving.
right.
I think Ellen is doing her best to accommodate all of the.
We're gonna move the finance, right? We are deleting section 75 and 76, so that's gonna affect section numbers.
that's why we're putting deleted in there, so those section numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are they?
Those were the allocations, the statutory allocations.
The notwithstanding.
Okay.
The PTT allocation
Okay,
for the
'cause right
general
now-
fund and the municipal
Okay.
planning. Yeah, those were all removed for just the session law there for the allocation for this year. But
Okay.
I just pulled up section 73 of the underline, which is not in the amendment, just
Okay.
as a reminder
Okay,
of
that's
what
the
it is.
property transfer.
It's property transfer tax, and it is, if you remember, increasing the threshold that's not taxed for principal residences that are using funding from BACB, BHFA, and Department of Agriculture, right? And
Sure, we'll do that turns out.
And the piece that generates revenue here is, because increasing those thresholds, of course, costs revenue, a little bit of revenue. And what generates revenue here is having the 2.5%, I think it's 2.5. Yeah. The 2.5 rate for residential properties that are not used for principal residence and will not be used for long-term rentals. So, I think what Pat was saying is out of the allocations, the extra amount is what's generated from this new piece.
So the difference between that piece and the exemption threshold change in the section just prior are what are generating additional revenue, which we base those allocations, which Kirby just touched on. Those are based on those changes there.
And we are doing an allocation rather than the traditional VHCB gets 50%, which we frequently withstand or notwithstanding.
We're notwithstanding it right
Notwithstanding
now.
the whole thing,
Yeah.
and we're just allocating the money we think we're gonna get this year.
Mhm.
If we don't get that much money or we get more, I guess it carries over till next year. If we don't get it.
Like what's, if the amount is estimated,
Yeah, it doesn't work.
everyone blames Jennifer.
Yeah, I mean, who's
So first.
gonna figure out what happens or just hold it in advance until we get it back?
So what we were just looking at, the revenue piece we were just looking at is what these allocations are coming from.
Thank you. So there's 512 from the general fund into Housing Conservation Trust Fund. Do you know what their total anticipated revenues of the fund is? Is that spelled out?
It's this plus what was allocated in the budget already, which would have come out of this 32 million.
Yeah.
That's. Do you have that?
Yeah, so the total like revenue generated here is 12.7 roughly. And that's with the exemption threshold in the second homes. You'll see later on, we've taken a portion of that off the top in anticipation of NRD lost fee revenue, which leaves a total of like 11.84 million. So we're anticipating about 6.7 of that will be available for the general fund to fund the appropriations in this bill. So that's not explicitly laid out in the language here, but it's factored into the estimate. That's the amount above the 32 million that's you see there. There's the allocation to the trust fund, which is the 5.1, and then also from this is the 1.2, which is going to the planning fund. So the total revenue raised is about 12.7.
But Pat, there's a spreadsheet that you may or may not be able to stand by fully right now that had a larger allocation to VHCP that appropriations is looking at.
Yeah, we
What is that amount? What was
I
that?
would ask Ed to quickly just come over here so I can point to a number and he can nod his head.
Okay, Pat.
This is what's in the budget. That's what's in the budget. So what's already in the budget is about 22.1 million to the trust fund. So this 5.1 is in addition to that amount.
Right, that's where I was confused, because at one point we saw those added together, so.
Yeah, so total it's about 27.2.
Right.
So where did the 32 come from?
That is the language from the budget. It includes the bond payment, the clean water surcharge.
Okay.
It includes some other things that are sort of above the line.
All right,
So those are the PC allocations for this year that were added to the bill in replace of statutory allocation changes. And then we next get into the amount off the top that Pat just mentioned for the Act 250 permit fund. So originally, this bill had 2 million being allocated to that fund. It is now changed to 900,000. And there's an additional allocation elsewhere. So that's the only change goes to this section from the end of the bill.
And the funds here are the anticipated loss of Act 250 revenues. If we put in our 311 proposed exemptions at some similar level and just look to the future when there will be less Act 250 permitting required in tier 1 A and B. So this was the estimate for that alone.
You costed out the Senate, not the working research.
No. But you mean like the 687?
This
Oh, the PHP.
The 687 language, it's different.
Yeah.
Working on designated areas as well.
Right.
I think until some things get recognized, finance might want to hold off in appropriating exact numbers. But this one's, we are somewhere at the beginning now, but we're allocating exact numbers under some that they are the correct numbers.
So if I may,
I didn't ask.
right, I'm sorry. So we have another one-time allocation of $400,000 to the NRB to allow their professionalization to occur 6 months earlier. We took that one-time amount out of the regional and municipal planning funding and resilience funding. That was our committee's desire, is to give as much extra money as possible to regional and municipal planning. So if for some reason we land on exemptions that cost less, we could increase the amount to regional and municipal planning. I think that's still a conversation that Senator Kitchell would be in the most control over what happens if we find an extra $300,000. Because she has many uses, but we took that bite out of regional and municipal planning, even though we're giving them more than they would have otherwise gotten this year.
So how much more are they getting?
1.2
million. And that's addition to what they normally get.
or what they get not withstood.
So, so the next couple of sections here are just, it's the conforming, language for the changes for the Act 250 permit funds. And then we get into the property freeze exemption, which is several sections. The language here reflects what was asked, by this committee on Friday, which is to create a 3-year property freeze that is limited to the counties where natural disaster was declared. So I've made those changes. There's a statutory purpose that was there before. I added in flood impacted communities to the statutory purpose. So this is to lower the cost of new construction or rehabilitation of residential properties in flood impacted communities. Change the heading to the subchapter to reflect that. The exemption mostly operates the same. I made one technical kind of improvement here to specify that a qualifying property means a parcel with a structure. If the taxes were paid on the parcel, this originally was just structure. But that's just to avoid any confusion
Yeah,
about
because you're,
how it's applied.
the tax, the base, probably the largest part of the tax will be on the parcel. If you have it, their house.
And part of this change came out of a conversation I had with John about what happens when a structure is torn down. You know, so it's just a clarifying.
Yeah.
But what's new for what was asked is under qualifying property. It's still limited to designated downtown village center, neighborhood development areas. And new market tax credit areas. But there's an additional limitation that the property being located in an area that was declared a federal disaster between July 1, 2023 and October 15, 2023. That was eligible for individual assistance from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. I mostly took that language from the flood abatement bill that was passed earlier in the session to have the same overlap.
I think my question, we've got all that downtown centers and I'm not sure what the designation is in the north end of Barry, which is where we have some of the largest residential damage. And one community said they would like this tax. I don't know, Alex, do you know, are they gonna fit in here?
In terms of flood impacted community.
So it does, I was reading, is it either or, they're in a downtown, or is it and, they're in a designated
It's and.
area?
I'm happy to speak to that.
Okay.
Hi, Greg Boley, Tax Commissioner. Ledge Council could speak to that specific piece, but in terms of, my read is that it's both. So you gotta be in the flood designated area and one of those designated areas. Your question about the north end of Barry and some of the parcels. I think that there are some parcels that were flood damaged that would not fall into those designated areas. And part of the discussion we had with them was being open to expanding those definitions to allow.
Okay, they could expand their designated area.
Sorry, I was talking about expanding the language within this
Oh,
bill
the
to
language.
maybe be within certain distance from one of the designated areas that would capture those parcels.
Okay.
I think the process of changing the designated areas is a more onerous one.
Yeah. This committee, is that right? I'm not sure where the designated village or downtown or Johnson or Ludlow, those are the ones that we have to think of, but we've got a lot of small villages that have housing damage. And I think our goal is to help rehab flood damaged housing, so.
What's the source of the money for the freeze?
There isn't one. But the
Oh, yeah, there is one.
it's, well,
That's
it's
what I'm saying.
tax, it is a money that does not go to the ed fund.
With all of the premise on this housing business has been affordability,
Right.
and the proposals that are made don't seem to mesh with the theme of it, everything's about affordability. We're using property transfer money, we raised the tax for get property transfer.
On second homes,
Yeah,
okay.
which are affordable. People buying second homes can afford them. That's why they're buying them instead of Vermonters who can't afford them.
Okay,
So why do we raise that so small? Such a small.
Sure.
The realtors just testified that, the second home buyers, are good for the economy because they don't have expenses. And
I don't think it's.
we have a housing problem and they're buying the housing,
Yes,
which is the number one affordability problem we have, that Vermonters can't afford houses. And we're seeing the second and third, fourth home buyers get a measly increase in the property transfer tax while they're buying up the houses that they find affordable, that Vermonters can no longer afford, particularly when these same buyers are outbidding Vermonters for the homes that Vermonters
Right.
used to buy. They're outbidding Vermonters for the construction work to spruce them up. And Vermonters can't afford to buy houses. Why do we have such a paltry increase in the property transfer tax
we're done.
to people, pardon?
We're done.
They're doubling the price they pay for the houses.
Okay, other than the property transfer tax, which is, all these people are as rich as you think they are.
I'm not saying how rich they are,
Okay.
they're buying the houses,
They're-
and
yes.
Vermonters are not, because Vermonters
Okay,
aren't able to outbid them unless they're wealthy.
what is your solution? I don't think by federal law we can forbid out-of-staters from buying houses.
I don't know why the increase was so timid. And ignored the notion of the rules or laws of affordability that we spend so much time talking about. They can afford them, charge them more for the transfer.
What I hear is a proposal to pay for this property tax freeze for flood affected areas with a 0.1% potential increase in the property transfer tax proposal.
If anybody has an amendment proposal, bring it to this committee in writing. I need a proposal in writing that we can consider. We have things in writing.
They draft your shares.
Okay,
So I would propose we double the increase in the property
bring
transfer
it
tax.
to us in writing. I don't have to have it today. This bill is not coming out tomorrow.
Yep.
But I do need proposals in writing. And I. Okay. you can talk
Well, I
to
think people have it in writing. We don't. But why have we endorsed the property transfer tax increase? The paltry one that is, because it's the only one that's been brought up.
Actually, no, it isn't. There's another one in the House bill that we did go through that doubles, it makes it. Triples it, but it makes it cheaper for local residents. And we can look at that one.
I was.
Why don't you,
Done with it.
why don't you look at it and see what you think, and then you can take that up. That's not the one that's in the bill before us, but we did go over that once, and you can, maybe Kirby can bring that in tomorrow, whenever we take this up again.
Well, we
Yeah,
did-
so the House proposal was to impose a rate of 3.65%. Right now it's 1.25. Of the value of property that's in excess of 750,000.
Regardless of if their
So
primary residence is residential, it's not dependent on.
It's all.
It started a little lower and be up steps in there, but I think
Work
like
on
give
it?
it up.
Yes, you may work on it and bring it to us.
the House had originally put 600, but the feedback was that in some places in the 600 is actually not that expensive.
Yeah.
Now,
We
we
could
could
do the same way.
consider these flat branch at the end of my street just sold for $460. If you buy anything with 3 bedrooms, you're at 600 in the state.
And shouldn't have.
I have for 550, it ain't nothing.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd also like to look at the property exemption income sensitivity, because I think that's at 250, which would buy you a garage in some towns or a shed. So you-
Did I propose that we take out the designated area language and leave it at flood impacted? I think the designated area language was a holdover from the original effort to constrain where this.
No, it's where it would increase the cost if you just said anybody that got hit by a flood.
One thing I was going to note is even though it's flood impacted areas. Based on the way we defined it, because the flood did impact a lot of counties.
Right.
There are only 5 counties that are left out of this. And all the other counties would be included.
Okay.
So the 5 that are not included would be Grand Isle, Franklin, Essex, Addison, and Bennington. All other counties would be able to use this.
Did Franklin get flooded?
Yes, there are places in Franklin that did get flooded.
But Cabot wouldn't be able to use it because they don't have one of these designated areas.
Cabot was hit in Washington County was
There's in Enosburg and
designated.
elsewhere.
But it's not in a designated area.
Yeah, I don't know much about it. I know Montpelier has one area, but I don't know
That's-
what other. places
Yeah,
have
they,
this.
Cabot hasn't done the designated downtown?
They don't have a village. I mean, this doesn't include village centers.
It does.
It does.
It does.
Does Cabot have a village center?
I don't know.
I can find out very quickly.
Okay.
Well, the hardware store and the restaurant, that's
The fire department is gone, so that's all.
Didn't that-
Okay, we need to move on. It's
Is that through a
after
separate
5.
adjustment in the?
Kirby, can you
Yes.
continue to walk us?
Okay.
through?
So for the property priest changes, I was asked to include. The previous version excluded any TIF districts from using the property freeze. This does allow it, and we also added language to try to mitigate. The problem of having municipality beyond the local. So we've added this language that qualifying property includes property located within a typical financing district. Provided and notwithstanding the provision that would not allow this. An increase in the appraisal value of a qualifying property due to qualifying improvements shall be excluded from the total assessed valuation. Used to determine the district's tax increment during the exemption period. So
So we're excluding them from the background tax that would get paid.
the additional value that's
Yeah.
being frozen will not be part of the calculation determining
The 3 years.
the tax increment. And yes, it was 3 years, this exemption period.
Okay. Senator Gray.
So I don't usually do I almost never say, oh, we look at it in county house. But it is problematic the way we use those dates and those declarations. Because they had devastating flooding, but it didn't occur
Or-
under a
but-
federal disaster declaration.
We didn't include,
You know,
Did it impact a lot of housing? And I'm not trying to deny it. I thought we wanted to put that one, but we focused on the ones where housing was impacted because I feel like Addison County has a lot of roads and infrastructure.
you don't have to go back and,
I know you had one house with a mudslide.
yeah, right, I'm not trying to say, oh, because we had one house on one side, but
We didn't.
the definitions, the weather isn't matching up with
Yeah,
FEMA definitions. So rain over 10 days doesn't equal a disaster, but
right,
there was.
a lot of water.
Damage.
Okay, check and see what kind of impact.
Addison was excluded from the federal declaration.
It went, yeah.
For this purpose, where we're trying to deal with people in Vermont who are affected. And we do a modification that looks at communities that were affected in much the same way and suffered flood damage to include them. in this.
We can do anything we want. We're the
So
legislature.
we are.
Yeah, we can. I mean, I can remember my daughter talking about watching her friend's house be damaged during the flood. There's,
And we certainly know that, there were properties in Addison that were affected, there were properties in Franklin that were affected.
those might be the two I'd add.
I thought that October 15th took care of that.
No, they were in December.
Well, December flooding was different than getting August declaration by October 15th. I checked what they got.
I'll double check.
Okay.
What was and how, but it is true, I think the July flood, we ended up on the other end of
Right.
the flood period
Mhm.
then.
So
So that's the.
check on
they
that.
Take care of it.
check on that and see what kind of housing damage you had, and we'll see if we can figure out how to pull it in. It might be two houses that you've gotta have a blighted house in that area. Yeah. Okay, let's continue through the minutes. This, yes.
I think, yeah, so we did, we handled this. We changed it to 3 years. Otherwise, it operates the same as proposed from the administration. And all of the same, the sunset is the same as before. I was asked to change that, so 2037 would be when this would sunset. And that's it for the tax sections, and I think there's a few housing items that were included in this amendment. And then there's some appropriations that John had drafted that are related to the revenue we talked about.
Okay,
So I can.
I think we need to go over the housing, and I'm looking at the committee. Are you ready to keep going, or you wanna come back to this tomorrow? Come back tomorrow. I know Senator Bobby has a long drive, and maybe we can check on Addison County and see if there's Addison Franklin, see if there's some way. We probably got two houses, but we might be able to make them,
Add two houses.
yeah, add two houses.
If I can keep looking at that section as well for Barry, et cetera. The housing is usually in a ring right around the designated area, so we probably wouldn't be helping much if we stuck to those boundaries, but that right around it.
Yeah, Barry is the north end, downtown is up half a mile away. But it would be good if we could figure that out. Most of Montpelier's housing was definitely contiguous to the downtown, except maybe some out down the street. I'm not sure how far up those abandoned houses. So we'll give this some time to percolate. Senator McDonald is going to look at raising more money with the property transfer tax. And we will look at the House proposal. And I think that's it.
Making it marginal. See if it's
I think whatever you want to bring to us. You'll look at Senator Gray.
Just so that, I don't know enough to. But the first instance of amendment on municipal regional planning. And what the changes are, and then proposed discussion. Ms. Dale was talking about how it could affect the NRV, and so we're talking about land use planning. And it happening outside of 687, and I don't know how they put together, and I'm sort of reserving the right of the
Okay, I thought,
team that put together the 687 composite version. Say, we would need to understand that.
okay, at section 1. I thought that they deleted it because there was an appropriation of 1.5 million.
There's also language though.
And so they're getting 1.5 from the property transfer tax.
So,
So take a look at it.
yeah. It's less the money and what happens to the planning and who gets on to what.
Because I think they added resiliency, the extra money was for resiliency. And,
It wasn't ever, there was never any extra money, so
okay,
that's the issue.
Things
there
that
was no extra money this year.
conflict was in a year when we're flat with a flood, it's a reminder that
Yeah.
all the planning should always be thinking about how resilient is the construction or repair or new development. And I think that was really where we were going. So it should be that 213, but safety goes basic. If you build them halfway again.
I don't think there's disagreement, but from the appropriation committee perspective, the 1.5 million didn't have a home. So it now it lives within a larger appropriation for regional and municipal planning.
Okay. We are adjourned. We